Welcome to our series on the new music, part 12. We continue with Rich Heffern's interview of the Finnish composer Aino Juhani Rautavaara. Rautavaara, quote, 15 years later in New York, I was studying at Juilliard, and I found a book full of Byzantine icons. I composed a suite for pianos called Icon. 40 years later, the Orthodox Church in Finland commissioned a large choral work from me. I was happy to have that task because those bells and colorful towers were with me. Heffern. Many of your popular works refer to angels. What do angels mean to you? Rautavaara. I have set several of Rainer Maria Rilke's poems to music. He speaks of angels as terrifying archetypes, common to all civilizations. My conviction is that there are other kinds of realities, other kinds of consciousness. They are real, but beyond rational approach. If you want to use words, you can say angel, for lack of a better word. Music is a language where we can probe those other realities without words. Besides immense pleasure, music gives to the listener information. The information is not anything you can transcribe in words. As a young man, I went with a friend to a piano concert. The pianist played very well. When we left the hall, my friend, who was a pianist, also said, "Did you notice he did everything right, with very good command of technique and style, but he didn't really understand what he was playing. He just played without understanding anything." My friend said he couldn't put it in words, but he could readily sit at the piano and play what he meant. "It's this," he said, and he played it. This specific information that could not be expressed in words. That was the first time I came to this idea that there is another reality expressed in music. A scientist once wrote, "The existence of music is a continuous intellectual scandal." He understood there is a message in music, and there are no words for that message. It's from another world. Heffern. In the newspapers recently, there was a story about archaeologists finding a primitive flute, a section of bare thigh bone pierced with holes, in a hunter-gatherer site that was dated as 43,000 years old. Music has been with us a long time. Rautavaara. Yes, and why did they play that flute? Because it conveyed to them something that is inexpressible in words. This is from National Catholic Reporter, December 13th, 2002. The next article, Searching for the Golden Sound, is from an interview by Alan. Following two highly appreciated concerts in Oroville, renowned cellist Michael Fitzpatrick spoke to Oroville Today about the deeper purpose behind his music making and his involvement in the Compassion Project, a musical expression of interfaith unity. Oroville today. You call yourself a musical diplomat. What does that mean? Michael. The cello, I've discovered, is an extremely useful diplomatic tool. It allowed me to go into settings like the United Nations, where the predominant activity is words, and to use the instrument to tune the audience and the space. Actually, even before I play the first note, I still my mind and go into silence and to presence. The space with silence is already an extraordinary transformation of energy. And then to play the music into that space, to reach the cellular level, what I call searching for the golden sound, has been my quest for the past 20 years. I would have these mystical experiences on stage when it would feel like golden light coming in. I would hear it change the sound of the instrument. I could feel it fold over the audience. And then this union experience would occur. Something in the room would crystallize. Another way to put it is that the diplomat's responsibility is to communicate in such a way that everybody understands. And music is the universal language of the cells. It is sound carrying light. How universal is music? Can Bach be understood by all cultures? Yes, once you're in the domain of it. If you're not in that consciousness space, there is no shared field. Pablo Casals once remarked that generations of musicians have approached Bach as the professor, and that until the mind can break out of this concept, nothing is happening because the music isn't alive. That's why I think it's important to change people's perceptions of things. People get stuck in the labeling. Oroville today. Is the Compassion Project, which you've been so involved with, intended to change perceptions? Absolutely. The genesis of it goes back to 1968 and the historic meetings between the Dalai Lama and the Roman Catholic monk, the late Thomas Merton, in Dharamsala. Apparently, when they met, they had this profound sense of recognition. The Dalai Lama said, "I feel he is my spiritual brother." Merton wrote, "There is a deep bond between us." During those meetings, they made plans to extend the dialogue and work together for world peace. However, very soon after, Merton died in a tragic accident in Bangkok. When His Holiness heard, he was devastated, and I believe he dedicated himself to fulfilling Merton's wish to bring East and West together in a project for peace and compassion. In 1993, at the Parliament of World Religions conference in Chicago, there was a meeting between the Dalai Lama and the Vatican's North American Monastic Interfaith Council, at which His Holiness said he felt the time was now right to have a convergence summit. It was decided to hold the summit in 1996 at the Abbey of Gethsemane in Kentucky, where Merton had lived for 27 years as a monk. I was living in Chicago then, and about to make my way to Hollywood with my electric cello, I was putting a rock band together. But then everything went badly wrong. I was at my wit's end when somebody called me up and said the Dalai Lama was coming to spend 6 days at the Abbey of Gethsemane. At that moment, I saw fate lines crossed, and indeed, I received an invitation to provide the sacred music for the 6-day encounter between 25 Buddhist and 25 Catholic monks and nuns, an encounter which turned out to be a turning point in terms of a fusion of East-West consciousness. The music was intended only to be a minor part of the meeting. I played some Bach and Ravel, and also did some improvisations. But the music started binding the consciousness, like firing them in a kiln. And it got to a point when, for an instant, it seemed as if all the worlds and all the heavens stopped turning, and then started again in a new direction. When the meeting finished, we all felt we'd been rearranged at a cellular level. As the participants left, I was sitting with Geshe Lobsang Tenzin and Sister Mary Margaret Funk, head of religious and monastic dialogue, and somebody came over and said, "Is there going to be a recording of the music?" Both of them thought it was a great idea, but I wasn't so sure. I'd just been offered this fabulous opportunity to be involved in a Broadway musical, and I knew also that taking on this project would be a huge responsibility. I also knew that if I did take it on, it could not be done in a recording studio. At that moment, a vision flashed through my mind of Tibetan and Trappist monks chanting together inside Mammoth Cave, the largest cave in the world, deep beneath Kentucky, with torches lit like a scene from the Bible. So I said, "I'll do it on one condition. You have to let me record it inside Mammoth Cave." And they both said, "Let's do it." What we got was the musical expression of what had happened at the summit, and we experienced this musical cellular awakening in the core of the earth during the last summer solstice of the old millennium. We were in some universal time zone, and the sounds that came through reflected this. Question: you were seeking a new kind of music? I didn't go down to the cave with a program. We were not simply going to recreate what happened in the Abbey. I decided we would start with an improvisation for cello. It would be an invocation for world peace. When I started playing, the music that came through my cello was like when your soul is on the line. I just poured everything in there. As I finished, I plucked one string so hard it ripped off. Then there was a flute solo. The monks chanted. Brother Paul delivered this extraordinary invocation, quote, "Can there be any silence as deep as that in the heart of the earth? And out of that depth, let there rise up a new hope, a new spirit of greater aspiration for peace, for justice, for compassion over the entire surface of the earth, from east to west," end quote. All the way through, we had spontaneous epiphanies like that, up to the moment when my logistics assistant gave the Tibetan monks soap bubbles, and these Buddhas were blowing these beautiful bubbles, which looked like cells, like musical harmonics in the magical light of the cave. And the epiphanies, the magic, happened only because nothing was pre-planned. There was no safety net. We had to keep flinging ourselves off a cliff and trust that we had the wings to carry us safely to the other side.